Express. This is a special program that we've put together with the Mystery Writers of America, the New York chapter, and the Friends of the Ferguson Library. Many of you might not know that the Friends is a special group of the Ferguson Library. I often call them the special sauce that makes us unique and special. Because they not only run our wonderful used bookshop, but they also put on programs such as this. And in pre-COVID times, they would be fundraisers for the library. And tonight we're very pleased to bring this with the Mystery Writers of America New York chapter without any cost. And it's allowing us to bring in some pretty special guests. So you're in for an exciting evening. As we start, I would like to introduce you to Connecticut writer Tom Strahl. He is an Emmy-nominated TV producer and author of 7 New York Times bestsellers under the pen name Richard Castle. And just so you know, the Ferguson Library has them both in print and ebook, or you can go to Elm Street Books. He still writes and produces TV, most recently Showtime's Nurse Jackie, and is also a director of the National Board of the Mystery Writers of America. So welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Alice, and thanks to everyone at the Ferguson Library in Stamford. For years, the Ferguson Library has been a terrific venue for CrimeCONN's annual in-person panels, but great partners that they are, they have now set it up so Mystery Writers of America, New York's and Connecticut chapter can go virtual like this. And what a boon it is. It gives us all a chance to escape the tension, conflict, and death threats of the election season and talk about things more civilized, like murder. That would be my Keith Morrison impression. Is it an author panel or is it something else? Thank you very much. Tonight's panel is something else. It's entitled, How Do I Get It Right? The Writing Craft During Quarantine and Isolation. The moderator is also something else. Jill Fletcher is a freelance editor and frequent contributor of short stories, flash fiction, and essays, recently appearing in Writers Crushing COVID-19, an anthology for COVID-19 relief. She is currently co-editing a book on the town of Wethersfield, Connecticut's unique architecture and its historic preservation efforts, as well as multiple mystery novels in progress. As a member of the MWA, Jill has helped develop marketing promotions and programming for the writing community, including this here annual Crime Writers Conference, CrimeCONN. Jill, will you get it right, or will something be strangely wrong?
Thank you, Tom. Nice to see you. And thank you all for attending. I think we're going to have a wonderful time tonight. Lots of information to cover and some really, truly wonderful panelists. I will introduce you to each of them in the order that they appear in our handout. First up is Reed Farrel Coleman. He is called a hard-boiled poet by NPR's Maureen Corrigan and the Noir Poet Laureate in the Huffington Post. Reed Farrel Coleman is the New York Times bestselling author of Robert B. Parker's Jesse Stone series and the Gus Murphy series for Putnam, and other series too. He's a 3-time recipient of the Shamus Award for Best PI Novel of the Year and a 4-time Edgar Award nominee in 3 different categories. His Where It Hurts is nominated for this year's Best Novel Edgar, and he's also won the Audie, the McCavity, Barry, the Anthony Awards. He's a former executive VP of Mystery Writers of America, and Reed lives with his wife on Long Island. Thank you for being here, Reed.
I'm very thrilled to be
Alexia Gordon. Yeah, and lots more awards too, I've noticed, that, and many more series. Now, Alexia Gordon is a physician by day and an award-winning Own Voices crime writer fiction at night. She's the author of 5 novels in the Gathesme Brown's mystery series. Her latest, Execution in E, was published in March 2020. Alexia is a member of Crime Writers of Color, Sisters in Crime, International Thrill Writers, and Mystery Writers of America. She also hosts the podcast, The Cozy Corner with Alexia Gordon. Welcome, Alexia. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And then we have Richie Narvaez, right?
Narvaez.
Narvaez. Richie Narvaez. He is the award-winning author of Roach Killer and Other Stories. He is the author of Hipster Death Rattle and Holly Hernandez and the Death of Disco. His new book of short stories, I hope I say this right. Wait, let me say it.
It's a toughie.
I don't, I said it like 100 times. It's like, oh, you say it.
Noir.
How do you say it?
Noir Eurekan. Noir Eurekan. It rolls
Noir
off the tongue.
Eurekan.
Yeah.
Noir Eurekan.
Yes.
Say that
Eureka.
5 times fast.
Oh God, I said it 100 times
Yes.
today. Published on November 2nd. So it just came out this week. His
3
work
days
has
ago.
appeared in Grand Central Noir, Long Island Noir, the Mississippi Review, Shotgun Honey, and Tiny Crimes. Very short tales of mystery and murder, among others. He served as chapter president of MWA New York chapter for 2 years and was recently appointed artist in residence at Morris Park Library. He's one of the judges in the 2019 Penn Open Book Awards, and a lot more than that, right? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So
Thank you.
we have
Great
an
to be here.
exciting, we have a really good group of people who are performing at a high level in this field. So what I wanted to start with right away is understanding that we have a group of people here who are possibly published writers, possibly at the same level as y'all, but are also really trying to get their start. And there are certain things that happen in that path to success that I think all of you have walked a different road. And I'd love it if you could share what your success stories look like with tips for those listening tonight. And I'd like to start with Alexia. How'd you get here?
I got here through a writing program at Southern Methodist University. It was called the Writer's Path. It was similar to an MFA, except it was at night. So it was designed for people who had day jobs and families and couldn't couldn't take the time to do a formal MFA program. So it was non-degree, but the goal was by the end of the program, you would have a book-length manuscript of quality that if you could enter it into a competition to get to meet some editors and agents in New York. So it probably lasts, depending on how many classes you take per semester, maybe 2 to 3 years. And you literally start from, this is how you structure a plot all the way through, here's your final revision. I actually ended up going to a writers conference in Dallas, the DFW Writers Conference, and pitched to an acquiring editor, among other people. But I found an editor who was interested in my manuscript, and that's how I ended up getting a contract. I tried the query letter route, which for me was not successful, but that's just me. But pitching in person was the way that I did it.
Okay. And so that very first manuscript, was that the first in your series?
Yes, that was the first in my series. What actually ended up coming out in print underwent a great deal of revision from the time I got my contract, but it was that it was my class. It was basically my class project. It got its start at Southern Methodist University and ended up in a state where I was offered a contract, and then of course it underwent heavy revisions after I got the contract, before it saw the light of day or the ink of print, I guess.
So that is just so fantastic, is you sat down and you did the work, you took the classes, you applied what you learned, you wrote a book, you were able to get a contract, and you were able to not only write that first book, but you were able to continue with a series. And it's been over how many years now that you've been doing this? Is it like 4 years, or how?
The first book in this series came out in 2016, and I believe I started the program at SMU in 2013. So from 2013 until now.
So it's been more than a book a year published?
It actually works out to about a book a year.
About a
The last
year.
one being out, I think one year might have had like one at the beginning of the year and one at the end, but it's roughly maybe a book every 10 months or something like that. So
Wow.
So that's a success story. It's discipline and effort, and here we are. So I love that. Thank you. That's, if only it was so easy for everyone. But now I'm going to move over to our veteran here to read. Tell us your story. How did you do the work and get
Well,
where you are today?
One thing that's really important to emphasize is that all the people here had different routes. So there's not just one route to doing this. And that's really important for people to hear that loudly. Alexia and I and Richie all of us have different routes here. So I will try to do this briefly. The only writing classes I ever took were in poetry. I've been a published poet since I was 13 years old, and legitimately published since I was 18. And I went to Brooklyn College and studied with David Lehman. I took, sat in on classes by Allen Ginsberg and John Ashbery. But those are the only formal writing classes I've ever taken. And I did what most people who are poets do, because, if you want to be poor, be a writer. If you want to be destitute, be a poet. Because poetry tends to pay in extra copies. So unless you can eat those copies or use them in your fireplace. I followed a long tradition of poets in that I had a regular job and published poetry. Wallace Stevens was an insurance executive. T.S. Eliot was a bank clerk. William Carlos Williams was a physician. So that's what I did. I went in and I got a job, and I worked first at the World Trade Center and then at the cargo area at Kennedy Airport. So if you've ever seen Goodfellas, those are the people I work with. They were all named Vinny, and and it was a really interesting thing. So one night a week, I had to go from the airport to Manhattan for meetings. And there was a big gap of like 4 hours in between. And I took a night class at Brooklyn College called American Detective Fiction, because it was basically the only class that fit my schedule that I was at all interested in. And I was never a reader of mystery fiction. To me, detective fiction were those cheesy books on my dad's nightstand with the half-naked women holding guns. I was a snob. I read, Vonnegut and Camus, and thought I was really a big shot. And then the first three books were The Continental Op by Dashiell Hammett, Farewell, My Lovely by Raymond Chandler, and The Maltese Falcon. And that night, after 4 weeks into the class, I went home to my wife and said, I want to quit my job. This is what I was meant to do. And 2.5 years later, 6 months later, I quit my job. And 2 years after that, my first novel was published. And that was in 1991. So 31 novels later, here I am.
Wow, that's wonderful. So do you think that your more classical literature education informed your detective writing, or do you think that?
I'll tell you, my poetry did. I wouldn't say, my sort of snobby literary stuff certainly influenced my thought, but it didn't influence my writing. I'd say poetry really influenced my writing, hence the, noir poet laureate and hard-boiled poet. But and Vonnegut did, but the other stuff, not really.
Okay. And Richie, tell us your story.
So much like Reed, in college, I was a literary snob. I wanted to become a literary writer. I ended up staying around college immediately after I got my bachelor's to get a master's degree, because I didn't want to get out into the real world. And the master's degree was in creative writing. And I had to write a novel. And it was a nice, typical Bildungsroman that young people generally write. and it is horrible, and no one else shall read it. It's in a bottom drawer somewhere where it belongs. And I started immediately sending stories out. I was getting things published, but even though I had taken creative writing classes, I didn't know how I actually did it. You know what I mean? I had to crunch through it, but I didn't have a way to do it. I didn't actually know how to write. It just happened. And so I sort of struggled with this for years. I wrote a lot of very bad poetry, some more short stories. And then in, maybe 12 years ago, there was a call for stories for something called a postmodern noir issue of a literary magazine. And I thought that sounded interesting. Again, like Reed, I thought, well, I'm going to be a literary writer. I don't want to write that stuff, that tripe, that pulpy stuff. Who wants to do that? But I had grown up reading quite a bit of Chandler and Dashiell Hammett and Agatha Christie. So I said, I think I could do this. This could be fun. And I wrote a story that eventually, it didn't get in there, but it actually ended up getting in this magazine called Murderland, Murdaland, which was one of the first in this century literary crime fiction magazines. It went under pretty quickly, which is what happens with
right after you publish your story.
Right after, yes. I actually, to tell you the truth, I have a curse. I have been in so many first or second issues of magazines, a lot, and they died right after. So, I'm like a mummy's curse of writing. So I got in there, and the thing is, now this is a slightly different path, as again, Reed was saying. It was because of that I got invited to a reading. And in that reading, I got to meet, I think I might have actually met Reed that day, but I met another person, and they said, "Oh, are you the person who wrote the story in Murderland?" And they said, "We love that story. Will you write one for this anthology?" And that's how things sort of started. Yeah, and I think I got into an anthology that Reed was in. We did a poetry, actually together we did a crime fiction poetry magazine for a very little while, but that's what got me started. And I think what was important to me was meeting people in the community, understanding how the publishing world went. My first book was actually a book of short stories, because I still, and again, in a sense, sort of lean towards the literary side. I really like the literary crime fiction. So I put together a book of short stories before I had the courage to finish a novel. But I finished my first novel, Hipster Death Rattle, about 5 years ago, and it got published about 3 years ago. And now I've gotten another book, another novel came out recently, and my second book of short stories just came out this week.
That's great. So networking, taking the classes,
Yes.
doing the work, appreciating the work of others. And again, luck and discipline. Is there
Luck,
anything
yeah.
you want to add?
No, I think that, well, discipline is important. Actually, just to get back to the other point, I did not know how to write after I left college. After having to go through deadlines and getting invited to anthologies and figuring out, I actually learned how to write. Maybe in the last 6 or 7 years, I learned how a story is crafted and put together.
Yeah, Jill, I think Richie
Learn by
said
doing.
something. Richie and Alexia said something very important to people who are just starting out, which is writing is only part of it, but understanding the publishing industry is really important, which is why you should join a writers organization. I mean, I'm not here as an advertisement for writers organizations, nor am I picking one, although MWA sponsors this, but it really is helpful, because navigating publishing is a very difficult, I mean, I'm not telling Jill, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but there's a lot of people out there who don't realize this, that knowing the ball field you're playing on is just as important as knowing how to play the game. And publishing can be very confusing. And so it's good to speak to people who know how what the field is like and how to play the game.
Absolutely. So what we want to do is we want to do the work, we want to do the writing, but we want to figure out how what our own path would be. And luckily there are others who can help you along the way. And a lot of times you can find those folks through MWA or Sisters in Crime and some of the other organizations. So thank you for that. The other part we wanted to talk about is getting it right. And in the title, there was a typo on purpose, because the editing process is really important. It's really important to, when you have that manuscript that is a little rough, of what it takes to polish it and get it where it needs to go. So I want to ask you a little bit about some of the things that are done right. And I'm just going to throw out a few of them. It's writing the hero, writing the villain, the villain that you love to hate, or writing that one scene that is encapsulates the entire work, of where that's the scene that tells the story. So can you speak a little bit about your creative process when you kind of get a little of that lightning bolt, or what that feeling is of, oh, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to say.
Well, I only get it when I read Alexia or Richie's books.
Very good.
Never in your own. Well,
that is kind of true. I mean, a lot of times I'll read someone else's and it's like, gee, I wish I could write as well as that person. And it's like, I should have done that. And then you try it and you realize that you can't actually take someone else's voice because it doesn't sound right coming from you. And honestly, I try not to fall too in love with anything I write, because it's guaranteed that the line that I think is the best line since, move over Agatha Christie, get out of the way, Dashiell Hammett, this is the best line ever. That's the one line my editor crosses out 6 times. And it's like, what are you talking about? This is horrible. So I try really hard not to fall in love with my own work, because what sounds right in my head is not necessarily what someone else reading it is getting. And so it was really hard with the first book, but it's gotten easier to take that constructive feedback and realize, like, okay, yeah, you thought it sounded good when you were saying it, but it didn't come across quite the way you envisioned. And so maybe you need to rework it some.
I think it's funny. Yes, those are the great parts of writing, when you write something you think is really good, but I think what newer writers need to know is it's your job. It's your job. And so if you're waiting for inspiration, that is not a good way to make this a career. The bottom line is, and I will steal this line from Hank Philippi Ryan, and many of the people out there know Hank. And she probably stole it from somebody, but I'll give the credit to Hank. It's I'm inspired. I write only when I'm inspired, and I make sure to be inspired every day at 8 o'clock in the morning when I sit in front of my computer. So it's discipline. It's writing is mostly when you're not inspired. I mean, I'm not bringing up this number to brag. I've written 31 novels. Okay. If you can't write 31 novels on inspiration, it just doesn't work. So you better get good at being inspired every day, and doing your job.
Yeah, I think getting onto that idea was writing from inspiration. I think it's a very young, sort of naive way of approaching writing. And I think that's what was happening to me when I got out of college. I was waiting for the lightning bolt. And it took years to realize that it's work. And I think I worked as a journalist for a while, and I realized, you have to construct the thing. You have to put it together. And just to go back to your question, Jill, I think what's important for writers to know is the first draft is garbage. It is always going to be garbage. It needs work. The real writing happens in the editorial process. You're going to happen, as Alexia says, there are going to be sentences there that you love, that sing, that may have nothing to do with the rest of the story. It's like, oh my God, what a lovely sentence. Save it, copy and paste it, save it somewhere else. But if it doesn't work within the structure you have, it's got to go. So you have to really be malicious with yourself which I think it takes discipline, and you really have to learn, like, this is not going to work. This has to be fixed in this way. And it's all about really getting past yourself, and this idea that, as Reed's saying, it's done. I think a lot of the Beat generation was like that. That idea was like, I'm typing it out on tissue paper and it's rolling out and that's it. Nobody touch it because it came straight from my soul. That's not the way real writing works.
By the way, Richie meant to say his first drafts are garbage.
Yes. Yes. Only mine. Only
mine are golden.
If you're here, you give it right to the publisher. Just
Yes.
take it. Just take it.
Actually, I have a link, and as I'm typing it,
It just goes
to
right
the
away
publisher.
to the printer. It goes to the printer.
It skips the editor. It skips the
Right to the
publisher.
Well, that's really great. So Reed, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Is during our technical rehearsal, I asked you to just read a short passage from one of your books. Do you have that handy? Are you able to do that?
Sure.
Look at you.
Sure. Do you want to give the people some run up to why you're doing this, or do you just want me to read it?
Sure. The run up is that when in my editing work, in my own writing, and as someone who just can read a book a day kind of thing, there are moments in a novel or any writing that where it just sort of resonates with you and you say, oh, that is what we aspire towards. When I was reading some of Reed's work, this was one of those moments that gave me pause. So I thought it would be nice to hear that, and we can talk about that a little bit.
Sure. This is what not to do. No. This is from my second Jesse Stone novel for the Robert B. Parker estate, called The Devil Wins. And this is from early on in the book. The wind rattled the windows and the loading bay door. The plinking of sleet was less urgent now that the snow was falling in sheets and collecting on the corrugated metal roof. Raw, cold air seeped into the maintenance shed like an accusation and made heaving clouds of their breath. Small plumes of breath came from the mouth of the nude man on the floor at their feet. His wrists and ankles were trussed behind him, and his sun-streaked brown hair was caked with the drying blood that had leaked from the welt at the base of his skull. His broken lower jaw was unhinged, his mouth a wreck of splintered teeth and bone. After the pipe had been laid into him, the spray of blood had given the air a coppery tang that the two other men could almost taste. But the blood had settled out of the air like silt out of water. Now the place smelled only of burnt black motor oil, gasoline fumes, and antifreeze.
Yeah. So much better than some of like the murder porn that's out there, where the building itself is breathing and the victim is breathing, and it's just really amazing. So thank you.
Well, the
for
first
reading
line
that.
of the
I
chapter is
appreciate
really, it was a dark and stormy night.
it. Oh, you're too fun. And then I want to go into Dark, Richie's book, the Nuyorican. These stories, they are, yes, they're so, but it's so beautifully done. There's poetry in that book. Yeah, it's just, I know we're gonna have to go to Q&A real quick, but what I wanted to do is just have you talk a little bit about that story collection and your inspiration behind it.
Oh, okay, thank you. Just to clarify, Nuyorican is a portmanteau of Nuyorican, which is a Puerto Rican New Yorker, and I just stuck noir on it because it sounds good, and of course will probably limit the sales completely. But I wanted to write crime fiction stories from a Puerto Rican, Nuyorican, Latinx perspective, because there aren't that many of those. and I wanted to, I really enjoy writing noir, and I wanted to experiment more with the whole, the Kane, the 1950s pulpy, people who want too much get destroyed in the end kind of stories. So these are not happy stories. These are not things with happy endings. There's death and a lot of unhappiness or bad decisions in these stories, and they're all but one of them have been previously published, like when Ellery Queen or something like that, and I rejiggered them, of course, as I can't help myself. But they're all very dark stories about city people that I know, and it runs a gamut of crime fiction. There's a little horror in there, and then there's a superhero story at the end, which is still kind of crime fiction and still noir.
But, you know, they're so well put together. It is like a musical album.
Thank
where
you.
we play off each other. We have a rooster in the first story, and the rooster reappears in another story later on. And I recommend it highly.
Thank
And Reed's books, of course, and Alexia's series as well. All good. Which, speaking of music, your character, Alexia, is a classic violinist, correct?
Yes, yes. She's a professional classical musician and conductor, which was actually sort of my way of wish fulfillment. I am a music fan and a supporter. And I was in Alaska and I discovered I'm really not a good cold weather person. I don't do cold weather sports, but fortunately the winter is also symphony season in Alaska. So the symphony kept me sane. And literally, because I really didn't like Alaska. And I fell in love with classical music. So my character allowed me to sort of pretend to be a classical musician because I don't actually have any musical talent. So I just write a character who has lots of the talent that I wish I had. So that's how I ended up with that.
Well, the pieces that you select are wonderful. When I was reading along, I used the Alexa to play the music that you had in there, and it just added so much to the story. It was really special.
It's actually a really good idea.
So it was really great. So we do have some questions on our chat here, and I want to include those. So one question we have here is, how much do your readers influence your work? Does hearing from your readers ever affect you? And we'll start with Reed.
Does it affect my writing? Never. Does it affect me? Yes. You know, I was discussing this subject today with a writer friend of mine, is that I've been on panels where this question has come up, you know. The only audience I write for is me. And if I please me, if I surprise me, if I make myself upset, that's my test for me. I think, and this is just me, I think for me, if I started listening to my audience, I wouldn't have an audience. You know, it's when you play, I got to please who, and also I'm sure my audience is fairly broad. And which one of those people in that audience am I supposed to please? So I hope I please me, and I hope it pleases other people.
Very good. So someone asked this question. My question is, how do you know that you truly have talent, as you all do? How do you know when your work is going to be good for readers?
I think you hope it. I mean, everybody else should answer this, but
Yeah.
I don't think you know. I still don't think I know. I think that's up to other people. That's something you have to believe in yourself, and then it's up to then. The only thing you can ever control is what goes on the page. Everything else is up to other people. to determine how much talent or anything else is up to other people.
I agree with Reed. Actually, on both of those questions, I agree with him. I mean, I can only tell, well, my editor influences my story, but other than that, I can only tell my story, and I can't, there are too many readers to try and please all of them. I just hope that the story that I have to tell is the best one I can tell, and that pleases them. And if someone else decides that that means it's talent, yay, I'm flattered. But I don't tell myself, like I said, I try not to get a big head. I don't, and say, hey, I know I've got time. I mean, I know someone else liked my book enough to give me a contract, and I know other people have liked it enough to buy copies or recommend copies to their friends. But that's, I don't consciously tell myself, I'm a brilliant writer or anything like that.
And I guess similarly, so I don't interact that much with my readers. I mean, both of them are nice people.
and only one of them is your mother.
Right, only one of them is Mom. But she seems to like my work. Though she gave me, the review on Amazon was crushing. I generally, I do get some feedback from my readers, but like reading Alexia, I don't necessarily. I mean, if I get a cruel review, I've learned to pretty much ignore those. I've had some people knock me about using too much Spanish, but I don't care. I actually think I'm pretty good with adding Spanish in context in my stories. I don't think I overdo it. I think they're just perhaps not looking at it the way I intended. And, you're not going to hit everybody the right way.
Well, I also want to mention about your book. I thought that the use of Spanish seemed very intentional and very well placed. It seemed like that became an element of the book. Like I was saying, some of the repeated things that happened through the other stories. It seemed like it was very telling of the characters, of which ones were using a lot more Spanish than others. I just thought there was something thematic there. And here's a cat.
Yeah, thank you. And also just to get the idea of talent on, it's as any artist has to struggle with this. Like, am I talented? And there's this book called Of Human Bondage by it's not S&M. By Somerset Maugham, and it's about a guy who goes to Paris to become a painter, and he struggles for years, and he finally goes to his teacher and he says, do I have any talent? The teacher just tells him, no, you've got the craft, but you don't know how to do the rest. And that's kind of crushing. I think we all go through a kind of process where we're trying to figure out, do I have the magic spark?
Richie, yeah. I don't think I've ever met a writer or musician or painter who doesn't feel somewhat like a poser.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's a very common thing. We all sort of feel like fakes. Like, especially if you would get a bunch of good reviews or an award. Oh, well, that's only because it's something else, maybe because I know the people or something like that. I would say that if you're a new emerging writer, you're trying to figure out if you're talented, don't ask your mama. Right? Don't ask your friends. You need to get people who don't know you to look at your work. And the idea of talent is kind of it's a subjective thing. I mean, there's a way of writing a story well. You can write a story well, but it could be incredibly cliche. I can only say that do what just work on the craft. Work on the craft. But if you're listening to other people, if you want other people's opinions, go outside of the people that you know.
Exactly. If you want someone to like your work, show it to mommy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But the deal is this. I would say some talent is necessary, but not sufficient.
Yeah.
So all you need is a modicum of talent, and you don't know how much you have or don't have. So don't worry about it. If you're driven to write. Don't start worrying about things that's not up to you to know or care about.
Right.
If you have, I think Alexia was right. You can only write your story, and you can write what you write. And then if other people like it, that's up to them. That's not for us to determine.
I did want to add one thing.
So
can't actually ask my mom, but she's one of those rare people who can divorce herself from the fact that she's related to me, and give me her honest opinion. I asked her with my first book, would you buy my book? And she said, well, I'd check it out from the library. So occasionally there's a mother who will actually give you an honest opinion, but that's the exception.
So I want to ask you all, here we are in this pandemic, and you'd think that with so much less happening socially and not being able to go to restaurants, as we were talking about earlier and all that, that now we have all this extra time. And don't we want to be writing, King Lear or whatever you're supposed to do? How is that affecting the three of you? How are you doing during this isolation period? Is it good for your writing, or what's going on?
It's good for my writing. It's bad for my reading. I haven't been able to concentrate enough to read much. Writing, I've been doing writing so long that just, that just happens. I sit down in my office the same time every day as I would anyway, but my concentration in terms of reading is not really very good. I have to say that that's true.
I would say similarly, my reading is not gone well in these last few months. It's hard to focus for a long time. And for me, it's been more difficult to work on a novel I've been trying to do. So I've been doing a lot of short stuff. I think it's harder the anxiety of the day and other things, and worrying about, keeping my job running and stuff like that. Takes up a lot of headspace. So it's I've been working, but doing a lot of shorter stuff right now.
Yeah, I've honestly not found I had more time because everybody discovered Zoom. And so now I've got I'm back in grad school, as some folks know, and so we've got classes all morning on Zoom, and people want to have more meetings on Zoom, and conferences are on Zoom. So things that actually I wouldn't have been able to do because I would have had to get on a plane and travel somewhere and take time off of work, I can now do virtually. So my schedule has actually filled up, not wound down. So my reading has been mostly for class, and like Reed and Richie, my mystery reading has suffered some, but the writing, I've always done it evenings and weekends, so I still have my evenings and weekends, but I've actually been kind of busy.
So, but mentally, like, is everyone hanging in there okay? I mean, is it hard? How do you write a crowd scene if you haven't been in a crowd in months and months?
Well, my social life consists of going to Costco. So
you can do a mystery in Costco 1, 2, 3. That's
yes.
Right.
And I've always been more
Well,
of
it has been.
loner type. So honestly, the isolation I kind of like it. I've never been a big crowd person, so I'm actually fine with that part of it.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I eerily enjoy the isolation and not having to go out. And in terms of also I've actually written some stories about COVID already. I did one for an anthology called Lockdown, and I did another shorter piece for flash fiction. So I'm sort of already started incorporating the world we live in into my fiction as a way, I guess.
Right, we're living.
Yeah.
And like Richie, I've done I've done some in between novels. I've done short stories because, well, for me, short stories are kind of a tool. I'm a better writer for every short story I've ever written. I'm a better novelist. And I think that's something I would recommend to people listening who write short stories. Sometimes tackling a novel is a big project. And if you can, a novel is like the night sky. A short story is like a road flare. So learn to focus on one subject, one thing, and you can really hone your craft that way. And short stories are easier to get published than novels are to get published.
Now, when you start something and you're off to a good start, but all of a sudden it's kind of not working, how long do you stick with something before you abandon it, or do you?
I never abandon anything. It just goes in a drawer and I'll come back to it later. No, nothing is wasted.
Yes.
I might have really stinky stories there's something, there's usually a kernel of something I can use. I don't abandon anything. I may know that it's garbage and leave it for later. I'll come back to it, but it's never truly abandoned.
Yeah, Richie calls those first drafts.
I call them temps.
Alexia,
Well,
what
I
do you
also
think?
have
I
mentioned
just set, I set things like Richie, I set things aside. I have, now that we've got computers, it's nice because, I've got huge, some number of terabytes of memory. I can save everything, but I still in storage have crates, literally crates of, started things and scribbled notes that I'm not going to throw away because, there might be that one idea somewhere that I didn't know I needed then that I could use later. So, but if I'm writing the same thing, every day for, a week or two and literally can't get another word down, it's like, okay, maybe I need to put that aside and work on something else, but I never actually get rid of anything.
I think it's an important lesson. Richie hit on it. When I taught at Hofstra, I used to tell my class, and every class I've ever taught, one of the first things I say is, there is no such thing as wasted writing. And to prove that to my class at Hofstra, I mean, I haven't taught at Hofstra for about 5 years. So this is 5 years and, maybe 6 or 7 novels ago, I totaled up estimated how many words I'd written. And it was something like 5 million. And none of it has been wasted. None of it. Not one of those were. Now, most of them were grocery lists, but no, I really believe that there's no, even a story abandoned is not wasted. Like Richie said, you can either come back to it or you'll find some long. I can tell you, I was nominated for an Edgar for a short story that was the beginning of a book that I, went nowhere. I'd written it, it just didn't go anywhere. But I adapted the first chapter of it, and it was nominated for an Edgar. It was the shortest piece of fiction ever nominated for an Edgar. And that came from an abandoned project. So nothing is ever truly abandoned, or you shouldn't truly abandon anything.
I came across this line that it was on a Tumblr thread of why I write. And someone said the answer was because creating something that didn't exist before is as close to magic as I'll ever get. Do you feel like a magician when that story comes together?
Boy, I'm not a romantic. See, this is all.
You hate that question.
Yeah, that's all wonderful and everything, but this is my job. I make my living doing this. This is not. See, I think and another thing I always used to sell my classes was, if you're waiting for the big money, the private jets and people to throw roses at you, work for a florist, because that's not what. Yeah, that's not what this is about. It's not about the romance. It's about your job. This is my job, and I take it seriously. And yes, is there magic sometimes? Like that paragraph I read that I wrote, like that was really good. I agree, it's really good. But guess what? There are 320 other pages in that book. So
there were other good paragraphs.
Yeah, a few, but they're not all of them are magic. Trust me, not all of them are magic.
Well, I know that Alexia writes more in the cozy genre, and her stories actually do have some magical elements. So I wanted to talk about where you said that it's kind of wish fulfillment, doing the classical music. What is it with the ghosts and some of the other things happening there?
Well, I mean, I grew up reading horror stories right alongside reading mysteries, and staying up till ridiculous hours in the morning watching horror movies on late night TV, you know, back in the days of the rabbit ears, and you'd have to stand on one leg and hold it with two fingers to get the antenna to tune in that random channel from Baltimore or wherever. So it was, part of it was combining the two things I love. It's odd for a physician to love murder, but murder and ghost are two things that I love. And well, I with Reed, I'm actually not romantic, but this is work. This is my side hustle, but it is still work. But it's still satisfying to be able to create a world that I want to see. And part of what I wanted to see in my world was ghost as well as a murder mystery.
Do any of the ghosts play the violin?
One plays the piano, actually. So
Oh,
the
that's great.
ghost of a
That's
composer,
great.
so he plays the piano.
I'm looking at our questions here. Mhm. What was it, Rich?
Oh, I can't. Oh, yeah. I also don't look at it in a romantic, magical kind of thing. I think of it much more as a craft. I guess much like a job. It's like I'm a carpenter and I'm making a really good table, or I'm a chef.
Mhm.
And these are the ingredients, and I enjoy seeing what's going to happen with these ingredients. And I'm using the knowledge that I have and a little inspiration. And sometimes things just happen as oh, that worked really well when I deleted that. But I don't see of it as a mystical thing happening. I admire that some people might have that kind of feeling, but that's not the way I look at it.
Well,
And
I
the rest
just
of us
like it
will
when I write something.
The
Yeah.
rest of us
that
will
we-
determine how good that table is. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. This is a little wobbly.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so tell me about, because of I do editing, I just kind of want to hear a little bit about how you work, how you collaborate with your editors.
I just got done editing my new novel. So this is and I've had a lot of editors. Many of them are now dead
Mhm.
and they haven't found the bodies yet. But no,
You killed them.
editor to editor, it's a different process. And I've learned, I think Alexia brought this up before, is I've learned better how to deal with editing, the editing process. It's not easy when you begin because you're very attached to your work in the beginning. And now my attitude is I have my work and I have my children and I never confuse them. You know, work is work and it's words on a page. And if it makes it better, right? Now, that doesn't mean everything an editor tells you, you have to do. And especially when you've gotten deeply into my career as I have, my attitude is it's my name that goes on the book, not the editor's name.
Mhm.
But I still, for the most part, certainly consider everything the editors suggest. And most of the time I absolutely accept the small things they suggest because it doesn't matter. It's not worth fighting over small stuff unless it's stylistic. And then you can't fight every fight. Every suggested edit is not a thing you should fight World War III over. But in the beginning, right, Alexia, it really hurts. It does. It does. It hurts in
You
the
take it
beginning.
personally the first time. You're like, am I really that horrible of a person? Why do you hate me?
Yeah.
But then I learned, no, the editor's just doing their job and they want to make it better. And like I don't make every exact change the editor says, but if they recommend something, I do look at that and say, well, okay, this means that some other person didn't see where I was going with this. So even if I don't make the exact change the editor said, I probably need to make some kind of change because someone reading this didn't take away from it what I thought it was. So it shows me, hey, this is a point where maybe I need to clarify something or re-explain something or expand something. So I take my editor's advice very seriously, even if their exact recommendation doesn't end up on the final page.
And for me, I enjoy working with an editor who's really on the ball, who's read my stuff and understands what I'm trying to go with the story. It changes from editor to editor, as Reed's saying. There's some editors who they don't get my humor. They're not seeing what I'm trying to do. They don't quite understand the cultural references. And it can be a back and forth process. And for a lot of little things, oh, all right, you don't like that gerund there, you don't like that comma, whatever, fine, okay. But for other things where for Holly Hernandez, for example, that YA book, somebody didn't get this whole series of jokes that I had going on. And it was really upsetting because of course I thought they were hilarious. But I was like, you know what? I know that there are people who will get this. You're just not getting this joke. And it was a generational thing. Some things you fight for, some things you let go.
Yeah, and I think it's important. Sorry, Richie, I didn't mean to step on you. Yes,
Right.
I did. But
Of course you did.
yeah, if you can't tell, Richie and I go way back. So and we love each other. So well, he loves me.
Thanks, Reed. There's your
Yeah.
Christmas.
For people starting out, listening to there's an art to who to listen to when you're starting out, and that's a scary thing. Should I change what I've written because one person said I didn't get X, Y, or Z? And the beginning writers have a real problem with this because they either hold on to stuff too closely and refuse to change it, or they're too quick to change it. So my suggestion is always join a writers group. And try and get in a writers group where the writers are better than you are, not at the same level you are. Or hire a professional editor because they're out there and they know what they're talking about. And if you're not going to do those things, I have the rule of three. If three people you show it to have the same comment, gee, the guy who you have as the bad guy, he's so one-dimensional. I don't get it, or your dialogue all sounds like it's from one person. Then maybe you should pay attention to it. But it's one of the hardest parts of beginning is who do you listen to?
Right. Well, and on that note, we're going to have to listen to Tom because it's 8:00. Thank you so much, everyone. This has been really good. I know there's more to talk about, but we're going to have to stop here.
Thank you, Jill Fletcher, and also your panelists. And if I could, just because I think one of the best things that those who are watching and listening could enjoy is how to stay in touch with our guests. And so I thought I would ask each of you, as I say your name, to please recite your website. So thanks to our panelists, Reed, Farrel, Coleman.
You can get in touch with me at reedcoleman.com, or just write to Reed at Reed Coleman, not Reed F. Coleman, reedcoleman.com. And I'm on Facebook, and if you friend request me or whatever, I won't answer you. No, I'm very happy to answer all questions. And thanks a lot for having me. I really appreciate this. This is lots of fun. Jill, Tom.
Alexia Gordon.
Yes, I'm at alexiagordon.net. I am also on Facebook, Instagram. I think both of those are under my name. You can also find the Cozy Corner with Alexia Gordon is another way to find me, which I forget what my Instagram and Twitter handles are for that, but I'm out there somewhere. But alexiagordon.net and alexiagordon.writer on Facebook are probably the easiest ways.
Great. And Richie Narvaez.
You can find me at www.richienarvaez.com. That's Richie Narvaez, no space, no underscore, NARV as in Victor, AEZ as in zebra. You can also find me on the Instagram, RNZ1000, and on the Twitter at Richie_Narvaez. Narvaez. And I am open to DMs. I do not mind them. You can reach out to me there, and I'd love to talk to you and add you. So to have a third reader would be wonderful.
Thanks to all of you. And as ever, thanks to the Ferguson Library in Stamford, Connecticut for its ongoing support, plus the Mystery Writers of America's New York, Connecticut chapter for putting this on. A reminder that tonight's hour was recorded and is going to be available for blackmail. No, is going to be available. Will be available on YouTube tomorrow. So if you missed any of it, go to the Ferguson Library link. 2 quick plugs before I go. Next week, 1 week from tonight, Thursday, November 12th, it's How to Connect in a Time of Disconnection. Moderators Charles Salzberg and John Valeri bring you a pair of clever communicators, Lauren Bright Pacheco and Barbara Peters. And 3 weeks from tonight, November 19th, I'm sorry, 2 weeks from tonight, November 19th, an exciting event. It's Chris Knopf in conversation with the legendary Walter Mosley and breakout author S.A. Cosby. To miss it would be murder. Or would it? Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good
Good
night.
night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.